Hello, welcome to this video. Thank you so much for joining me. I've been out in the back garden for 2 days letting off over 100 pieces of visco fuse to check out Firefly's reusable igniters to find out just how reusable they really are. The results are very interesting, but before we get to those, I insist that you watch a short but very upbeat introduction. You know you want to. I'd like to start actually with a bit of background information as to why I'm testing these. These are noted on the Firefly website and on the box as being reusable, but no figure is given as to how reusable they are. Technically speaking, if they work twice, they're reusable, although that wouldn't be particularly good. On the other hand, I don't think these are igniters for life, because if they were, that would be blazoned all over the packaging as a selling point, and we wouldn't be using disposable igniters if such a thing existed. So probably the truth lies somewhere in between. Also, this system is a bit more expensive than Ignite. I'm mentioning Ignite here because both systems are app controlled. You're looking at about £50 to £60 more to get invested into this system. So the reusableness, if that's a word, of their igniters is actually quite important, because you would need to recoup that extra expenditure and hopefully a bit more over buying a cheaper system and using disposable igniters. I hope that makes sense, what I'm trying to say there. So I think it's important to try and put a figure on this and to find out what kind of cost per ignition you're getting from this system. Before I head out to the garden, a quick look over the igniters. Here you can see there's 3 holes on one side. The middle one is where the fuse comes out, and the other 2 are for standard igniters. These are multifunction igniters. You can put normal E-matches or normal talons onto the terminals on these. On the other end is a socket for the power lead, which in turn connects to the base unit. The coil is accessed by a plastic door, which you unlatch and open up. Here you can see inside in more detail. The heating coil is in the middle there. When activated, it glows red or white hot. This is what ignites your fuse. On the thermal camera here, no surprises, this goes off the scale. Interestingly though, it does cool down very quickly, and once the door's shut, the outside is quite well insulated. There was no point during these testings when the igniters were too hot to handle, despite repeatedly firing them. So onto the field test now, and I've got a cunning plan for this. I'm going to use 4 igniters and do something slightly different with each one. Igniter number 1 isn't going to get any cleaning at all. So after I've fired a bit of visco, I'm going to open it up, tap the ash out, but then reload it straight away with another piece of visco. Firefly say as a minimum you should dry fire each igniter after firing, that is to say without any fuse in. This will heat the coil up and it will burn off any debris. So why do this if Firefly say you should do a cleaning run? Well, what if you forget to clean your igniters after a show, or what if you've cleaned most of them but missed a couple out? Will they fire again? How many times will they fire if you don't clean them? Also, if you get to the point where, because you haven't cleaned them, they stop working, can you then clean them, and will they start working again? So quite useful to know. Igniter number 2 is going to get the suggested dry firing after each visco has gone. So I'll open it up, tap the ash out, do a dry run with no fuse to burn off any debris, but apart from that there's going to be no cleaning of that going on. Igniter 3 is the lucky igniter. After each firing I'm going to take the igniter to a VIP area. It's going to get some scented candles, some words of affirmation to tell it what a good igniter it is, a back rub, some chocolates and so on. It's also going to get a dry firing, and I'm going to use a alcohol soaked cotton cleaning bud to clean the coil after each firing, so that gets a complete refurbishment, if you like, after each time it goes off. And igniter 4 is just a control igniter. If I get to the point where any of the other igniters fail, I will fire 4 to check that it goes off first time then we can rule out the batteries as being the cause of the misfire. So 3 very different tests. Here is the setup waiting for action. What do you think is going to happen here? My expectations were that Igniter 1 with no cleaning would fail after a couple of attempts. Igniter 3, which was getting a full refurbishment, would go on, lasting forever, and Igniter 2 would be somewhere in between. But that's not actually what happened. Let me just take you out first of all and show you the first firing. Here you can see the first 3 igniters going off. I was very excited at this point to see this actually working in real life. So it does what it says on the tin here. It's got a coil in, it heats up, it ignites your fuses, so that's good to see. Don't panic if you do buy a Firefly system and you fire an igniter and you open it up and it looks in a really bad state, as shown in this photograph. It doesn't get any worse than that really, but you've got to get used to the fact that inside these igniters they will be full of soot and ash and all sorts of crud like that. Unlike other field tests I've done, I'm not going to make you sit through every firing, even speed it up. In actual fact, I'm going to refer to my notes now and jump straight on to firing round 14. Here you can see then the first failure, and it is number 1, not a surprise there. But I'm going to take that igniter away now and give it a good clean. So I'll be tapping out the ash, I'll be air firing it and also using alcohol to clean the coil. So let's jump now to firing 15. As you can see, number 1 does indeed fire again. So there's an answer to the question, can you clean them up? Will they then work? The answer is yes. But you can see that number 2 now actually takes 2 attempts to fire, and you can see an aborted attempt, or a failed attempt I should say, by looking at the lights at the top of the picture on each cue. They go out while the cue is being fired. So if the lights go out but the igniter doesn't fire, so if the lights are flashing but nothing's happening, you know that is an attempt to fire that has failed. So number 2 here takes 2 attempts to fire, and at this point a complete disaster with Igniter 3, the one that I had such high hopes for. It broke during cleaning. I was using a cotton swab with alcohol and also a precision screwdriver just to try and scrape off any debris or lift the coil from the bed of the igniter, which Firefly suggests doing on their website, although they use a pair of tweezers. And unfortunately the coil actually broke at this point. That was such a disappointment. But there we go, that's what this test is for. So just 2 igniters left standing. On to the 16th run now, and number 1 is still fine, but a failure on number 2. Despite 2 firings, it won't go. So at this point I give number 2 a full service as well. That is to say, I air fire it, dry fire it, and then I use a cotton swab with alcohol to clean the coil. The 17th run then, and number 1 has now given up completely. The coil is broken, so that is now out of the running. 2 has come back to life. Staying with 2 then, and on the 18th firing it needed 2 attempts to fire. This was the same on run 19 and 20. On run 21 it fired the first time, but here on run 22 you can see it needed 4 attempts to fire. Run 23 it fired on the 2nd attempt, run 24 it fired on the 4th attempt, run 25 it fired on the 4th attempt. So I gave Igniter 2 another clean at this point. On run 26 it fired first time, on run 27 it took 2 attempts as it did on run 28. On run 29, as you can see here, it took 10 attempts to fire, but the control igniter fired first time, ruling the batteries out. I gave it another clean at this point. Run 30 and 31 fired first time. There was a bit of debris stuck on the coil, so I gave it another clean after 31, and 32 fired first time. Here is run 33, it also fired first time, but the coil did break at this point, so that was the end of Igniter 2. So what to make of these initial results? Well, the good news is that even with no cleaning I got 13 firings out of Igniter number 1. The bad news is that the igniter that was cleaned thoroughly every time didn't last much longer. It only lasted 15 times. That was a bit of a surprise. Obviously the act of cleaning it is a potential failure point. Number 2 with the dry run cleaning but no physical cleaning until it failed did better, but needing between 2 and 10 attempts to fire is going to be no good whatsoever on an automated show. You need everything to fire first time. So as harsh as it is on Firefly, I'm going to say that the lifespan of number 2 was 14 runs, because that's how long it went before it first failed. So looking at the figures then, we've got 13, 14 and 15 firings out of our 3 igniters, so that's an average of 14 per igniter. What do you think of that figure? Is it higher or lower than you were expecting or hoping for? I wasn't going to do another test at this point, because this is a whole afternoon used up doing this, but after sleeping on it I thought, if cleaning actually has a detrimental effect the way I was doing it, but clearly the cleaned igniter performed better than the non-cleaned one, can we look at how we're cleaning these igniters instead and maybe change things around for that? So I came up with another cunning plan. It was a complete and unmitigated disaster. I'll tell you what happened. I used this. It's compressed air. I figured, and in a moment of genius, I thought, how about cleaning the igniters after each firing with no physical contact? Blast away all the soot, all the debris with this, do a dry run firing to clean off any crud, and this should be an absolute stroke of genius. 2 things went wrong. One is that it turns out that this compressed air, even though it feels quite strong, is just not enough to get rid of baked on debris. But the main problem was, any compressed gas, even air, when it comes out it's cold, and if this comes out with propellant it's actually freezing. So what I was doing is firing an igniter, taking it to white hot temperatures and then freezing it afterwards with the spray. I realised as soon as I sprayed the first time and can see the evaporation on the coil that this was a bad idea, and in fact, just to prove a point, igniter number 1 in the second test failed on just the second firing. So compressed air, freezing the igniter coil, bad news. So I went away and thought about this for a bit. I thought, okay, let's try a few different ways of cleaning it. So for this next test, I'm actually using 5 igniters and trying different things with each one again. So igniter number 1, this is going to have a dry firing after each run to clean it, and I would, as required, use a pointed wooden stick rather than a precision screwdriver to clean the coil. This is a lot gentler, and also I can get in between the coil and clean off any soot rather than tap at it with a metal screwdriver. Igniter number 2 would be the same regime as number 1, but after every 3 firings I would clean it. So rather than clean it every time, I'm going to fire it 3 times, then clean it, fire it 3 times, then clean it. So I'm cleaning it but less. And on igniter number 2 I'm going to use this. It's electrical contact cleaner. So this would be sprayed onto the coil, and then I'd use a cotton swab just to wipe off any of the debris. Igniter number 3, similar thing again, but on this one I'm going to be using a WD-40 3-in-1 degreasing spray. So this again would spray on, it would hopefully dissolve all the debris. I'd wipe the debris off with a cotton bud and then we're good to go. And igniter number 4, I would be using acetone on a cleaning bud to clean the igniter every 3 times rather than alcohol, to see if acetone is any better or worse than alcohol. Igniter number 5 would actually be fired the same number of times as all the other igniters but have no fuse in ever. So when we get to the point of failure with the ones with fuse in, we can see whether using no fuse would still fail. In other words, have these igniters got a finite life whether you put a fuse in them or not? This is the first run then, and here are our 4 igniters working just fine. Fast forward now to run 19. So yes, we've already beaten the previous day's results of 13, 14 and 15. We're up to 19, or rather 18 already. This is the 19th run. This was the last run that igniter 2 worked on, because sadly it broke during cleaning. I was a bit annoyed by this because I felt I was being more careful cleaning it, and the contact cleaner spray looked like it was doing a good job cleaning the coil. Jumping up to after the 22nd run now, and I'm going to show a bit of footage while I'm talking about the state of the igniters. Just doing cleaning after number 22, one is beginning to get almost stuck in the bed because it's got caked on residue, whereas 3 and 4, when you scrape the wooden thing across, they're still a little bit springy. So I'm just going to see what difference that makes now air firing them. One is still glowing really well. 3 is glowing well in the middle, not so much around the centre. 4 again a bit patchy. 5 very bright, as good as the day it was born. On to just after run 25 now, and sadly it's bad news for igniter 1. 1 has just given up during cleaning. The continuity is gone. The strange thing is I can't... oh, there it is. The middle just popped out. The whole bit was brittle. Fast forward to run 30. Bad news for igniter 4. That's the one cleaned with acetone. That has broken during cleaning. So we've still got 3 in the running. In fact, we can jump all the way to run number 39. But after this shot, the igniter broke during cleaning. I was slightly annoyed by this as well. I think I'd got a bit overconfident with the cleaner because I thought it was doing such a good job. I decided to spray a lot more over the igniter to give it a good soaking. But doing that meant I had to touch the coil more to try and clean off the stuff and dry it and so on. So that ended up breaking the coil, unfortunately. A final test here with a broken igniter, just to answer a question that was posted in my forum. I'm attaching an E-match just to show that even with dead igniters, that's dead coils, you can still connect your E-matches or talons onto that. Swipe arm, fire. So what to make of test number 2? Well, here are the number of firings until the first failure. 19, 25, 30 and 39, much better than 13, 14 and 15. The average now is 28 per igniter, that's twice as many as test 1. 15 igniters supplied with this unit times 28 is the equivalent to 420 disposable igniters. With replacement igniters, if you were to buy them, costing around $5, I don't know the UK price yet, that's 18 cents per firing, which is a saving over disposable talons. Look at the battery power though, still on the same set of batteries. I counted that including the cleaning cycles, I fired the unit over 500 times and it was still going strong. That's £10 for a set of batteries, so currently that works out to 2p per firing to add to the equivalent cost per igniter, but that's great going. I didn't expect the batteries to last this long, so my initial reservations in my first look video about batteries being expensive, well, I've fired them over 500 times and they're still going, so that's not actually an issue. But can we do better and extend the lifespan of these igniters? I think we can. A couple of things I noted during firing. First of all 4 clips died during cleaning, so perhaps we can further refine how we clean them. Maybe physically cleaning them after every 5 firings, not 3, or even after every 10 firings. I don't think we found the sweet spot there yet. Second, I noticed that despite cleaning and dry running the heat through the coils, they had a slow but sure build-up of hard residue on them, and I think it's that rather than the coil that's the issue. It's making them hard and brittle. Igniter 5, which was fired just as many times as the others but without a fuse in, at the end was still glowing white hot when you fired it. Also, it was springy when I touched it with my pointed stick and it wasn't brittle. Third, I think the format of these tests actually works against the igniters because I need them to be ready to fire again within 30 seconds or so. So this stops me from giving them a good soaking with a degreaser, for example, rinsing that off, leaving them to dry and so on. So maybe a long-term test would be a better way of gauging how successful these coils are. Sadly, as much as I'd like to run more tests, I am all out of igniters now. I hope to replenish my stock, and maybe January onwards, when we're in the quiet time here in the UK for fireworks, I'll start a long-term test to see if we can get more life out of them. However, that's me done. You have a figure. The average, if you look after your igniters, but don't be too nice to them because that kills them quicker, bizarrely, is 28 per igniter on average. That's my test results. I hope you found this video useful. Thank you very much for watching. I will be back in the next video with a real world range test of this system, which I can tell you, having done the tests yesterday, is going to be very interesting. So don't miss that, and I will see you soon. Thank you for watching.